Oh, this is so nice. Thank you. All right, so it's all working now. This is getting very exciting, and very exciting for one particular reason. So if you check the schedule and you read properly, you'll find out that the length of this talk is a little bit surprising. That was a little bit surprising to me. And I thought, can I really pull that off? And guess what? I have a world record where I was speaking for 6.5 hours in Munich. And I think I'm prepared. So this session is quite long. And we're going to go through a lot of stuff. And we're going to go through a lot of stuff quickly. And more specifically, what I want you to take away from this are maybe some techniques that you can apply to your work right away. Some of the little things that we don't think about sometimes. And if I look at you now, I have to look at you now first. Well, you're smart cookies, right? So if somebody asks you to design a nice little accordion, you probably figure it out. It's not a big deal, right? If somebody asks you to build a little table that's supposed to be responsive, or a currency exchange calculator, you can figure that out. But what if the problem is slightly more complicated? What if you have to deal with something like a seat planner in a cinema, right, where you have to make it work on mobile? What if you have to design something like an election map, right, for different parties, different candidates, and you have to make it responsive and fast? There are many problems that actually require some sort of strategy, and this is what I want to talk about today. And this is me. This is how I used to look like back in the day. Things change eventually, I guess. 50% of my time is actually still spent on this little site that turned out, moved away from being wonderful white and clean towards red madness, which you can turn off, by the way, because I'm getting emails about that all the time. You can just click that button. It actually turns into white. Just saying, because I'm getting this email all the time. But the reason why I'm showing this now is because some of the things that I'm going to show will be actually from the work we did there, but actually 50% of my time is spent in companies, where I tend to do a lot of interface design work and front-end performance work these days. And it's very interesting to see that many companies have the same problems appearing over and over again, and this is nice for freelancers, right? So the things that I learned from these companies actually what I bring to talks like that. And so today I want to talk about two particular parts. Two particular things. One of them is how do we bring a little bit more interest or engagement into the products that we create by talking a little bit about signature, but not from the branding perspective, but more from the art direction perspective. What are kind of little techniques that we can use very easily without too many expenses to make our experiences a bit better. And on the other side, all those little design patterns of how to deal with little tables and accordions and things like that. And I think it's really interesting to talk about signature because, Sarah today in the morning was speaking about something similar as well, speaking about many things looking the same, and there is a good reason why many things look the same. Every time I come in a company, it always seems like it's the same story because this is kind of the traditional view of what managers think about the creative process. The design process is weird and complicated, because it involves people and systems and organizations, which often are really complicated, and managers tend to see a creative process looking like this. Where you start somewhere, right? At some point, you have this big bang start, and then you go and you iterate, and it doesn't matter if it's a choice of a framework, if it's developer, if it's designer, if it's developer, if it's diviner, anything in between. It's always the same story. We start, and we try to get to some point by iterating. But for me personally, this is very, very misleading. And not right. Because every single time I look at my work, I feel like it looks much more like this. Right? When you start somewhere, and you explore and you try to figure out what should be the next step. And eventually, you might be getting a good idea, so you keep working on that idea, but eventually that idea might turn out to be a dead end. And then you have to reroute and find another way. But this dead end costs time, and we don't like losing time. Right? Which is why we tend to reuse things that used to work in the past, which is why we have these things looking very similar, and it's often based on the fact that we tend to do these micro-optimizations all the time. Right? If you look in the evolution of Photoshop or Illustrator toolbar over the last 30 years or so, has much changed over 30 years? 30 years is a long span. It's a lot of time. Right? It's a lot of time. But if you look into it, not much has changed at all. But maybe that would be a good reason to totally rethink and reconsider what should be the optimal way of pushing those buttons or arranging these buttons. But we don't do that. In the same way, if we look into the iterations of our applications, Twitter, Facebook, it doesn't matter, it's always like pushing a little bit, one pixel to the left, one pixel to the right. How many of you had these conversations in the past? Let's set border radius at 12 pixels. And then a month later, somebody comes in and says, 13. And then eventually, like 2 months later, somebody comes back and says, 11 was the right one after all, right? And we tend to have these conversations which maybe, I'm just saying, don't matter much, but we optimize, and we do A/B tests, and we run them like crazy, and we go nuts over it. These are iterations of bottom navigation of a Facebook app over a course of 1 day, right? 1 pixel to the left, a little bit bluish, a little bit darker, a little bit lighter. Does it matter? Maybe it does, but maybe sometimes it doesn't. Because if we keep running those A/B tests without actually exploring the AZ test field, like trying something very, very different and comparing it against the baseline, we will end up in the local maximum, not ever reaching the global maximum that we could have reached otherwise, right? And we tend to focus a lot on trends. Like, remember this conversation? This thing, the iPhone comes up with that thing, and everybody's like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? This is horrible. This is, our job as designers, it's just bad, bad, bad. How are people going to read our wonderful, wonderful, precious articles? Well, the thing is, most people, 98%, will be actually using portrait mode anyway. So this is not really a problem, but we tend to spend a lot too much time thinking about this being a problem. In the same way, this is my favorite data point, actually ever. 2 out of 1,000 mobile users actually tap on share buttons on our wonderful websites. And we keep having these conversations about adding Facebook buttons, Twitter buttons. Just decide and get it done, right? It doesn't matter that much because people don't use them anyway, right? And we tend to be a bit more reluctant to try and experiment something crazy. And this is what you can find in print, like a beautiful, beautiful piece of, about architecture, and it's beautifully laid out and everything. And we can do that on the web, but instead, when we put these things on the web, they become templated, right? We just bring them in places where they're supposed to be, where they're supposed to live. Not because we're lazy, just quite a lot of work to make it better. So if we want something to stand out, we need to get some work done, right? And as Morgan Smuller said, we need sometimes to be really memorable. If you want to be really memorable, we kind of need to have an unprecedented attention to detail because there are many unknowns and many things that we need to consider. Are there any websites that you can think of right now which are so memorable that you think, even now, wow, that was a website I visited, let's say, in the last month? Should websites be memorable? Should they be invisible? So this is one of the sites that I will remember vividly for quite some time. But can you think for a second how much time and effort and resources and people and money and everything had to be involved to make this happen? Can you do that on a lazy Sunday? Probably not. This is not something we can all pull off. But we want to be memorable at the same time to kind of delight and connect with our customers. The same thing here, the boat, which is a remarkable, remarkable piece of design. It's a storytelling, interactive comic book, and it's really beautiful on so many levels. Connects audio and video and storytelling and all the beautiful things that you can think of, right? And it's really nicely intersects kind of the way we interact with it. So if you scroll down, and it's a story about the shaking boat. The boat starts shaking, and so do the comic parts, the strip parts as well. So they keep going. It's kind of, you're all really involved in it. But it requires a lot of effort. It's not something many of us can pull off. So for a long time, I was thinking a lot about how we can actually achieve something that's memorable as this, without going to extremes of creating and putting all the efforts that you can actually have to put in here. And there are a couple of simple things you can do. And the simplest thing you can do is eventually, in your interface, introduce a little bit of friction, right? Steve Krug, of course, said in the 90s, we should not make people think. But if we don't make people think at all as they experience our interface, how do we even get a chance to connect with them at all? Because they will have no opportunity to emotionally connect with us in the first place, right? And there is a good example for it. Many of you, or some of you, might have heard of Chicano Fats, which is a chain. Anybody heard of it? So it's a chain of Mexican restaurants in the US, and I think I have 12 now. And this is what they look like. You walk in, you might like it, you might hate it, it doesn't matter that much, but this is their thing, this is their personality, this is their signature, this is who they are. So you walk in, and you sit in, and you enjoy your tacos, right? And these walls are really huge. Now, these are the people sitting there, right? And these are the walls. So these are really huge walls. So every 2 months or so, they would hire professional graffiti artists to come in and repaint and continue the story that they actually continued 2 months ago. That's a significant effort. This is not a cheap, let's put a poster and call it a day thing. It's a significant effort. And of course, the restaurant menu has to reflect that identity somehow. And it does. You might like it, you might hate it, but it does. And the website, I guess, should be reflecting that personality as well. So this is their website. Again, you might hate it, you might like it. It doesn't matter that much. You have no idea what's coming. I mean, this is just a start, right? Can you think for a second of how you make this responsive? Or in the first place, how would you build this? Not just responsive. How would you build this, right? And so as you keep going, there is a lot going on, and it's everything that we don't want to have today on the web, right? It's heavy. It's a lot of visuals. It's tons of web fonts. It's horrible for performance. It's probably not properly accessible either. And it's really not smooth and everything that we never wanted. And guess what? They don't want it either. So in the spirit of 2017, the previous year, when we all talked about performance and how important that is, they moved away from this design to this design. That's it. That's much faster. It's much faster. No web fonts here anymore, right? No parallax, no nothing. But there is a lot that's lost between this design and this design, right? And no company knows it better than Bloomberg. That hired really great designers from New York, I believe, upstate, it doesn't matter, who were given the freedom to do whatever they wanted. And guess what? They did whatever they wanted, right? And if I ask you now, do you think this is a good design, right? Who would say, yes, this is great design? Who would say, no, this is not great design? Well, if somebody asks that question, go and punch them in the face. Okay, this is a violation of code of conduct, sorry. I didn't mean it literally, because this is the worst question somebody can ask you. Because the design is never good or great or bad. You cannot tell that without knowing the context. It worked much better than previous year, where they had a traditional, good old, templated design. So they sold tickets, all the tickets, 2 months faster. That's great design. There are no questions asked there, right? And Bloomberg is experimenting a lot with this kind of thing. And look, all of a sudden, instead of being that boring company that nobody really cares about much, they're seen as a design kid around the corner where everybody wants to work with, right? And they create these things which are really, one way of putting that would be strange. Second would be unusual. And third, interesting, right? And so many things are kind of, right? But they produce it just to provoke, right? This is one thing. And this is probably the feature that I will never forget in my life. This is going to stay with you forever. Have you ever seen this? Anybody? OK, so remember the timestamp. That's going to change your life and worldview forever. This is a feature on Elon Musk and all the adventures of Elon Musk, visually, interestingly illustrated in a very special way, using all the things that we are considering to be anti-practices or bad practices. It's fully accessible, though, so you can't say that they have no idea what they're doing, right? All the patterns that you see here are slightly experimental, I would say, but you might say bad design. It's great design because it was the most popular feature for that year, right? So would you say it's great? Would you say it's bad? You can read the article, the content there. It's all accessible. It's not up to us to decide, I guess, at this point, right? You have no idea. This is like you have to explore this beast in full entirety. And so this is why we see a lot of brutalism coming in, right? Companies trying to do something that's kind of goes against the best practices, sometimes in a subtle way, where things are a little bit off every now and again. So here, if you go to the Museum of Modern Art, I think, in Belgium, marquee tag again, and all these weird things, and stripes, and weird spacing, and huge bullet points, just a little bit wrong to introduce some friction. But of course, all these examples are just a bit too much friction, because sometimes you don't want that. If you go and produce something like this, which is obviously quite heavy, to say the least, right? And I hope you appreciate the cursor effect. Right? That's maybe a bit too much, right? But at the same time, you could try to do something similar in a much nicer and gentle way. So this is just making a museum website where the idea is the same, dragging things around, right? That's nice. Why not? So this is their personality, their thing. Just a little bit of friction every now and again, but doesn't go too far. Another thing you can do there is to make a boring thing interesting, right? This is the story of a famous Hans Brinker hotel in Amsterdam. Now, this is a very interesting hotel because it's a pretty bad hotel. So if you have a bad hotel, you have a problem usually getting 5-star reviews, right? This is how it works. And if people don't see 5-star reviews, they probably are not going to get into your hotel. So this was the problem that they had. And I thought, well, we can invest more money, but we don't really have the money. We can try to make the rooms better, but that's kind of, it also doesn't work either. Or we could try to appear worse. So if we can't be better, maybe we can be the worst hotel in the world. And so the website, of course, again, at the same time, has to reflect that personality of being bad, and as bad as they could be. So they hired an amateur photographer because they didn't want to hire a professional because that would be too professional. And they brought in all the weird things that you can think of, insects and all the stuff to have the most horrible hotel experience in the world. And guess what? They're booked, fully booked, because people really want to enjoy that experience. And they actually expanded to Lisbon at this point. And the same thing, if you think about the like buttons, you don't have to use just one, what we talked about. If you really know that nobody's using them, just use 50 of them. It's the same story anyway, right? So that kind of works. Why not? We also have these conversations about things that are basically wrong by default. Pop-ups and models, right? We create these sites, and there is a good sentiment for it. I don't doubt that. Who likes a pop-up? A good, decent pop-up? Anybody? Everybody's afraid to say so. That's okay, that's okay. I love pop-ups, okay? So let me ask you something else. Anybody misses Flash? I miss Flash, and I'm proud of saying that, but we'll get to that later. Pop-ups I love for one particular reason. You can make them work really well if you are not too annoying. This is probably the best pop-up I've seen in my life, and I want every single website have it everywhere. It's so annoying, it's really hard to close, and I love it. Right? So why not? If it fits within your story, just go with it. That's great. What's more boring than that? Well, than a pop-up. Pop-ups are boring, like literally boring. Well, this kind of thing. You go to buy whiskey or wine or anything of that kind, and you're greeted with a wonderful, beautiful pop-up, right? Tell me how old you are. I don't trust you. But this is what the pop-up says. So in this particular one, you can say that you're born on 32nd of 43rd month, 1547, and you may enter the site because they don't really care. If people want to lie, just make it easier for them to lie, right? But you can go an extra mile, like Austin Beer works. Are you 21? If you click yes, you enter the site, you're done. You're not? Well, are you at least 18? So it becomes this kind of a story, right? And as you start dealing with it, depending on what you answer, right? There is no way to click yes here anymore, right? So depending on your answer, you're going to watch a slightly different and strange video. And you're laughing at this point, but this is very important. This doesn't cost anything. I mean, everybody can do this. Everybody can come up with something boring and make it a little bit more interesting. And then this is why people will start sharing this, right? It's not like creating this crazy magazine layout like we saw in the beginning. Here's another one. The checkout. Everybody says, no friction in checkout. Add some friction to checkout. For example, title. What can be more boring in life than title? Is there anything more boring in life? Anything? So normally we have Mr., Miss, Mrs., this kind of stuff. So, I always wanted to be a prince. So you can choose who you want to be today. That's fine. You're kind of getting the same information, essentially. Male, female, whatever information you need, right? But this is kind of a much nicer way of asking. And this are like 60 options there. It's not like, you can go all the way. So there are many things you can do potentially, right? And even something that doesn't supposed to be fun can be a bit funnier. So for example, in Airbnb, have this little cute animation which shows up when you are supposed to take a selfie to identify yourself for the apartment. That's kind of cool. Here, a little animation where you kind of move things around. Just a little bit of shaking makes this thing a little bit cute, right? Here, as you actually see the products showing up, as you scroll through, you see kind of a little animation as if something is coming your way, instead of just clicking next button and the image appearing, like having some sort of like a small, smooth transition in play as well. And here for the product, where you see, because it's like a moving vehicle, just make use of the movement of the vehicle, right? So as you actually explore it, instead of zooming in and zooming out, just drag it left and right, so you can do that, right? So there are many options that you can do, you can use there as well. And sometimes it goes, of course, viral. So I think that many of you have seen this, and this is great. This is really beautiful, and this is an example of adding a lot of friction. And I wanted to type and retype and overtype and retype again, just to see if this character is going to respond somehow to me writing 20 or 50 characters, right? This is great. I think it's really wonderful. Right? And then, of course, the continuation, the second episode, is the pagination pattern. Because you can. But of course, you can do much more than that as well. This is a beautiful website. Audio is playing? Will be playing. This is a website dedicated to 50 years of flip charts in Switzerland, right? And it's wonderful how they use audio and video and the technology to actually make it all like really exploration, like a star galaxy. So you open the site, you can actually really scroll through it and kind of drive through it and explore the sounds and see who is playing, like who was big in 78, and 76, and 75. It's really wonderful, kind of connecting just three basic things. The motion and going through this space, the audio, and of course the parallax as well. Right? But sometimes you can exaggerate. Sometimes you can go a bit too far, and this is what happened to Skype, right? Where they started becoming a bit more like Snapchat. And as a result, many customers actually didn't like it, so they pulled back, eventually returning to the previous initial design. So we can't just go too far. But at the same time, that means that we need to have a focus. We need to be really focused on what we're doing and how we're doing it, right? And there are many simple things, and this is where we need to really understand what the pain points are. So if you think about the video player, on YouTube, on Vimeo, it doesn't matter where. What are the main pain points that people have when kind of using that kind of player on a mobile phone? What could be the main pain point that people have? Anything? Well, usually you imagine somebody calls you and you have to scroll back 5 seconds or scroll forward 5 seconds. That's usually very, very hard because it's really hard to be precise with sliders. So YouTube introduced this little thing. I think many of you have seen. You tap on this knob, and then the scale shows up, and you can, when you slide up, it increases, so you can actually jump over. That's pretty good. This really solves an actual problem that really exists, right? Here's another one. You can actually totally rethink the player experience altogether. It doesn't have to be just a box with some controls in it. It could be much more interesting. For example, this is an interactive experience where the entire frame, like the entire screen, is actually covered with this player. You can arrange the dots and the distribution of those areas or rectangles. And so as the interview is being played, and the subtitles, well, you can choose where you want to have them. The language, of course, the biography, maybe any related projects of that person, anything of that kind. That's pretty well done as well, right? What do you think about this beautiful piece of design? Do you understand what it does? Oh, everybody's still thinking, I guess. So this is a date picker. You know how date picker works? Right. If you want to type in 1957, you type in 1950 plus 7, and then you go to June 26, and this is your input, right? And you might say, this is just horrible. Come on, why would you do that? Can you think of any case when this would be much more useful than a good old date picker that we're all using? On the phone? Similar, yeah, you're going the right direction, yes? Yeah, well, if you have to, let's say, you're a date picker, you have to go back 20 years. That could be one. This was designed specifically for public library for dashboards because it's much faster to actually just tap on those big boxes instead of typing it on the keyboard, right? So we can never say if something is actually good or not. So this is a pretty beautiful, useful thing for them. You know what? One thing that really kept me busy for a while? What if you have an appointment? You want to have a spa appointment. When you're in your interface, do you ask for the day first when the user wants to go, or for the time slot, the first available time slot that is available for them? Right? So what you can do is both. You can say, because the problem is, if you choose the date, but there are no appointments or no slots available on that day, that's frustrating, right? At the same time, if you select the slot, but the first available day with that slot is 3 weeks forward in the future, that's not useful either. So you can combine both. When you ask, select the time range that best fits your schedule, and by default, all the options would be available for the different slots, and then it will just show you what the next available option is, or what the next available slot is. It kind of combines both in a very simple way, right? And we tend to think a lot about doing something in a very predictable way. So if you think about the tree planner application, usually it will be quite convenient. You type in where you're going from, and you type in where you're going to, and that's your input. Well, not on SBB in Switzerland, which is the train system in Switzerland, which is really, really nice. The way it's done is slightly different, where you have a touch timetable, where they actually have a predefined grid of items. I'll show it to you in a second. So you just start typing and click on, oh no, we don't need to go to navigation. Hold on. So you click on touch plan, and you end up with this view, which is essentially a grid of all the common destinations that people go to. And the more common a destination is, the bigger the square is. But at the same time, you can rearrange it in any way you like. So if you want to book a trip from one place to another, you just draw a line. You just draw a line, that's it. In the same way, if you keep going to the same destination over and over again, instead of typing from where you're going to where you're going to, you just draw a line. And that's it. And you bought a ticket. And then there is this beauty. Right? Oh, this is always a miracle. Where will be my country? Anybody from Netherlands? Oh, Netherlands. Or the Netherlands? Holland? Will it be in the top, being one of the fancier countries? Or will it be at the, in the middle because nobody really cares? Will it be in Dutch? Will it be in German, in English? You never know. You will always have to find out. So, can we make it a bit easier? Well, of course we can use autocomplete. This is like the simplest thing in the world. But we can also do more than that. For example, if you know where most of your customers will be, you can use Google Street API to say, just start typing your street address, I'll do the rest for you. So you start typing, maybe just the first 3 characters, maybe the first 4 characters, right? And then you tap a couple of times. I mean, some streets are just really lengthy, right? So you tap 3, 4 times, maybe if you know what the region you're delivering to, and that's your input. You don't have to type everything. And in fact, if you think about forms, they really belong to the past. We need to kill them. Anybody likes patents? Anybody reads patents? That's a very important patent. No, not many fans of patents, or just sleepy not patents people. That's okay. So this is a very important patent, which is also called one-click checkout patent, which actually expired on September 11, 2017, which is why I set up an alarm clock in 2013 for September 2017. And if we don't trust Wikipedia, of course, because Wikipedia. So we can go to Google Patents, and we can verify that it actually expired, which allows us today to have a fully functional one-click checkout on our website, e-commerce website. Anybody saw any one-click checkout experience except Amazon, of course? 1, 2 people. So why isn't it we actually use them? Because like a miracle, almost like a miracle, in September last year, Payment Request API was becoming available to all major browsers, including Safari and mobile Safari. Now, that's a miracle, right? And this is really great, because actually, we tried to build it in, and it was really surprisingly simple. So if you start building this kind of one-click checkout experiences, you end up with having something that will look like this. Hold on. So you click on one-click checkout, you end up with this little prompt that's going to allow you to select what card you want to pay with, right? Then you verify your identity, or you select the card that's already stored. Even if you have a new machine, you will have to do it only once. You type in your CV. I mean, it's not one-click checkout, but it's really up to you to decide how you want to build it, right? And then that's it. You're done. So we should really actually think about killing the forms because it's a native API, it's available everywhere, and it's actually supported in a very consistent way. That's pretty cool. By the way, talking about checkout, one thing that was super frustrating to many customers that we at least tested with in the Smashing Shop, but also in the other e-commerce sites I was working on, was the simple fact that when you type your data and you go to the almost last step when you have to review your order, and you realize that you made a mistake. You click on the edit button, and where do you land? On step 1. Why in hell would somebody at some point decide that bringing people all the way from almost finished order to step 1, where they have to then continue to step 2, when they have to type in sometimes retype the credit card data, but when they have to continue to step 3 just to realize that they made another mistake, to click on the edit button, to go back to step 1 again, and then retype the credit card data again, and then abandon because they're just too exhausted at this point. That's a really, really bad idea to drive people this way. So what would be better? You click on the edit button, you just break down this information that the user actually typed in into input fields, you click on save or OK, and you just continue, just finish off, right? And this is usually not the case. So those little things, those little pain points can really make a difference, right? Wow, I'm not doing great on time. I can tell you that. So essentially, what we can do is a couple of things, right? So we can embed a story to boost engagement. We can make users kind of try to think a little bit by adding a little bit of friction. We can pick the most boring element and try to make it a bit more interesting. One thing we always start with when we start designing is thinking, what would the experience be or the interface be if we didn't use any rectangles, squares, circles, or triangles? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Well, I can use all kind of shapes, like all kind of shapes, any organic shapes and so on. And then, once you have an idea or the concept for what it could look like, you bring in the good old kind of elements, like again circles and stuff like that, and then you make the experience really different, right? Yes. I hope that at least at some point we'll be getting rid of those web forms. They need to die. But before they die, we need to figure out how we deal with a good old friend of mine that I desperately love. And I will awake your love for accordions as well. Everybody familiar with beautiful accordion? Look at this beauty. Check. Right? You open something and you close. How difficult could it be? Right? You click on something, on a button, it opens. Click on a button, it collapses. Well, welcome to the world of accordions. There are 172 accordions on this site. And I went through all of them, so this is the one. If you need an accordion site, this is the one. Getting the examples where it's not really necessary to have an accordion, but why not? After all, they are accordions, right? And so this is accordion, of course, right? And then as you keep going, it's pretty much everything is an accordion here. It's like, sometimes you just design an accordion and think, this is the one, right? We're going to use it everywhere, right? And if you go to, let's say, calendar as well, and you end up on this wonderful page, so you end up with, like, for every single item, for every single exhibition or gallery or any event happening, you find not only a drop-down, which of course is, drop-downs, but also an accordion. It doesn't work, but it doesn't matter. Right? That's fine. It's still an accordion. Right? And then, of course, you go to tickets, and in the tickets, you have the ticket selection, and ticket selection, everything is an accordion, because why not? Right? But there are different accordions out there. Very often, we would use them to create a card, to make it collapsible, and expand it when necessary. Right? For example, something like this, where you have space, you can display all the entire beast. You don't have space, you just display it collapsed. Or FAQ, for example, or even something like a pricing plan. Right? But it's really interesting because there are many different implementations. Now, every time there is a question of how we're going to actually design an accordion, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions because there are very different implementations. This is a very interesting one. You can open it, but not close it. Because why would you want to close it? You're supposed to open another one, right? This is how it works, right? At the same time, very often you end up with something that's a bit more predictable. This is probably my favorite example, which I really like, and I use this kind of pattern everywhere, if I can, if you go from A to B, in order to indicate expansion, you don't have to use plus or minus or anything of that kind, but this little zigzag, which actually acts also as accordion, which means you can use it not only for like predictable FAQ and things like that, but also for visual purposes and maps. So here's a question for you. If you have this kind of pattern, if you have a mega drop-down that you have to build in, or if you have some sort of drop-downs, you have 5 items, news, opinion, sport, culture, lifestyle. You can put an icon on the left, you can put an icon on the right, you can put it in line. What would you choose, and what icon would you choose? Whenever this question comes up, you need to ask yourself 13 questions. Right? How do you design a category's title? What if somebody clicks on a title and wants to go into the category, but you don't let them because they want to open an accordion? And at the same time, what if somebody wants to open an accordion, but you don't let them because you drive them to the category? How do you deal with that? What icon do you choose to indicate expansion? Where are my plus people? Where are my chevron people? Chevron people, yes. Where are arrow people? Okay, anything else really, doesn't matter. How do you indicate collapse and expanded? How do you indicate that something is collapsed or that something is expanded? Where exactly do you place the icon? On the left, on the right, or on the right inlined? You know, right next to the text. Questions over questions. Oh, and then the magical one. If one section is open, and somebody clicks on another section, would you collapse that one automatically or not? Well, you need to make all these decisions. What happens if you click on the empty space? What happens if you click on the icon? Does it all matter? Well, it actually does matter. In fact, this is probably the best thing you can do, like really to make it kind of work in many different scenarios. If you have a category and you have a category's title, if you want users to drive users to both, just have this home section included in the section that the user is opening, but also the choice of the icon matters a lot. So this is a really interesting study where they tested all the different combinations and all the different icons that you could potentially use, except the zigzag and the arrow. I mean, arrow people are strange, sorry. No, not strange, just interesting. Right? And what's interesting about that is that people tend to click on different areas depending on where the icon is placed and what icon is used, and they tend to spend different amount of time finding the information that they need, which is a bit surprising. And according to that study, with all the icons placed on the right, users tend to click on the icon and not on the text. And all options with the icon placed on the right resulted in slower task completion. That does not mean, of course, that we should not put the icon on the right. The only reason why it doesn't work here is because this icon is very, very, very small. But most people tend to click on the icon. Now, why are they clicking on the icon? That's strange. We've been training them like monkeys for years to click on the entire bar, but they tend to click on the icon. That's just surprising. This is not right, right? So why do they click on it? Why do you click on the icon? Perfect, I have 10 more minutes. Excellent. I thought I'm totally over time. That's fine. So why do they click on the icon? Well, when you look into user tests, what they will tell you, well, I've been burned in the past. Because sometimes you click on the category and you drive in the category. You don't want that, so you have to return back. And you click on an empty space and nothing freaking happens. Nothing happens. And then you click on the icon and finally it expands. So we've been training people to click on the icon. So for them, clicking on the icon is the only safe bet, which is what they will tell you in the interviews. Which means also that this icon should better be big, because if people will be focusing on it, we want them to hit that icon as well, right? But icons are dangerous. This is kind of the study. It's a bit old, but it's still the same thing, what we see in our tests. Here's another one. Now, this is a very nice website. I love Ableton. It's a great product, great company. It's interesting that they couldn't use the hamburger icon anymore because it's been picked up by the logo. It's already used in the logo. So, it's kind of sad. But it's really interesting to see, when I ran the test, it was very interesting to see how people react to some particular parts of the interface. In particular, I was testing this one. All right, let's see. All right. So, can you tell me what's going to happen if you click on plus? First of all, who would click on plus? Okay, many people, I would say like 60%, just for the record. Okay, so who expects some sort of overlay happening, light box, this kind of thing? I think, a few people, who expect some sort of sliding in between the push and Live 9 intro. Some information right now. Oh, more people than actually would click. That's very surprising. Okay, so there is a good reason why when you click on plus, nothing happens. And you're laughing, but I did the same mistake times over times. And I'm sure that many of you, if you're designers, were doing the same mistake over and over again as well. Because if somebody comes to you and tells you, want to sell a bundle of 2 products, you want to sell push and Live 9 intro for this price with the buy now button. You just use plus to indicate the bundling thing, right? But in the end, people just click on it like crazy all the time, right? Not thinking around and saying, why the hell nothing happens, right? And in fact, the easy way out here would be to just replace it with something like and or plus as text, obviously, right? And so plus for me is the most dangerous icon ever. If I can avoid plus, I would totally avoid plus, because it has so many different meanings. Now, we kind of understand it depending on in what context it lives, right? So here, if it's next to the image, there are 2 common scenarios, either adding to the cart, depending on where you are on the site, or lightbox, and in that case, it really is a lightbox. But what about this one? This button, this magical button. So does it make a difference if you click on read more text, or on the icon, on that button? What will happen to you when you click on it? Do you know? Who would say the drop-down shows up? 20%, I would say. Who would say I will be scrolled somewhere? Okay, more people. But 20% would be expecting a drop-down, and actually in my case it was more like 30%, because this chevron is almost connected to the drop-down that we usually design, and having a chevron here might be a bit misleading, at least to this 20% of people or 30% of people. Using an arrow would be much more consistent at this point. So as I have a checklist, and I have a checklist for everything, including ironing and booking flights. You can ask me later. I mean, seriously, you can save flights easily. But also I have summaries. So we can use chevron or plus to indicate expansion. It doesn't really matter much. But the icon should map to the direction of what is going to happen. If you have an icon pointing down, then of course the sliding should be happening, vertically. If it's pointing to the right, it should actually be happening horizontally. The chevron could change direction, plus could change to close or minus. You can put icon on the left, on the right, it doesn't matter, just make the icon big enough. The entire bar acts as expansion. And categories main page should be listed in a drop-down as well. And expanded state could collapse automatically. The more items you have, the more likely it's that you will have to collapse or group things or close automatically, because people tend to get lost in the navigation. But if you have only 4 or 5 items, I would just leave things be and not close anything automatically. And of course, talking about accordions, we have to talk about my good friends, carousels. I mean, we really need to talk about carousels. I love carousels as well. This is the kind of person I am. I really am. And there is nothing bad about the carousel. Look at the carousel. No, the other one, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Why is it then that we just wrist it around our neck and create something like this out of a carousel? This is the most horrible carousel you can... Sorry if you designed it. It's beautiful. But having the dots that don't mean anything and arrows that don't mean anything, except moving back and forth, is not particularly useful. So when I was in Istanbul, I was really excited about exploring the world of carousels in Istanbul, and I was very surprised. They don't use dots. They use numbers. So this is a carousel, and this is more, just in case you need more, right? And it's kind of consistently used pretty much everywhere. So you never find dots. You always find numbers. So this is kind of interesting, right? And this is the best. I mean, you have an example for accordions. If you need an inspiration for carousels, I got you there, right? So these are all the carousels you need in your life on one single page. You have a horizontal one, a vertical one, the one with thumbnails, and a classic, a slider. Right? So it has it all. But there are also some, not so good carousels sometimes. So this is a very sad one. I really have to cry when I see this one. It makes me very, very sad. So this is a carousel, and these dots is the only way to control it. To move left and right. Makes me very, very sad. Very sad, actually. Which is why we create websites like this. Should you use a carousel.com? The answer is very clear. Right? And it's often based on data, and the data is very consistent as well. So from that particular site, the university website, where if you look into how many people actually see the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, that's kind of consistent. But usually in e-commerce, it's not like that at all. If you look into booking.com, for example, there is a good reason why they have on the product page, on a hotel page for every single hotel, approximately 30 to 40 images. Because this is where people actually pay attention. Right? It will not look like 100% all the time, of course, but the carousels can actually work really well. Because if you look into this case study, most of the time in e-commerce, it will look a bit more like this. With the carousel, we can zoom in and zoom out, where the first 3-4 images will be getting enough attention. I mean, remember, here you are able to zoom in and zoom out. You don't want to do that for like 20 images or so. Right? So people do spend attention to things that matter to them. And guess what? They don't spend attention to things that don't matter to them. Isn't that surprising? Not really, right? So when we look into e-commerce experience, most of the time we will see this kind of curve. But we also know that the first 3 images or so will be actually seen fairly well. And if you want them really to be seen, you need to make a little bit more than just having dots. You can have a full page background, full background experiences for carousels, like this one, in a particular shape, right? Or a circular one. Why not circular one? For example, this one. It looks pretty nice, where you have this automatically rotating carousel that takes up the entire screen, right? Then you can even make it a bit better by adding some labels to every particular part of that carousel experience, pretty much like Amazon actually does it fairly well. If you look into Amazon, a common experience that you will have is something that looks like this, where you have not just dots that don't mean anything, but actually providing some content, right, or context. So you have the thumbnail, and you have also the label or the place, like the category title of what it stands for. And as you actually go through it, it's more like a tab bar experience, right? And this is also still a carousel. And of course, if you can pull it off and replacing the dots with something a bit more meaningful, do that. So for example, the simplest way would be to just replace it with something that contains text, right, and maybe a bit more pleasing. Or just killing the carousel and replacing it with some images right there. Because obviously, if you don't show something, it will also get lower conversion. This is a very nice study, A/B test, that was actually mentioned by Luke Wroblewski from one of the Google conversions talk by Anna Patanina, when she was speaking about just adding that search bar, increased, of course, searches on mobile and searches on tablet, because if you hide something, you should not be expecting more traffic from it, to it. Right? So that kind of makes sense. So I have a checklist for carousels. We don't have to go for this. And also I have a summary. And just because I have to finish, right? I want to finish on something that's, I think, is also very important to wrap up. Hold on, just a second. I mean, I will be publishing the slides anyway, so don't have to worry about that. That's actually the notion of respect that we're kind of missing very often in interfaces. Now, if I look into this one, I want to go somewhere to a cinema, and I want to buy tickets, and I'm greeted with this beautiful piece of design, which is, again, a pop-up, and then I close it to actually book something that I wanted to book in the first place. It opens in a new tab. Oh, wonderful, huh? Everybody enjoys this wonderful experience. And then I think it must have been a mistake. They can't be that mean. And I go and do it again, and it opens in a new tab one more time. And then if I do proceed after all, and I do want to give them money, this is what I end up with. Please check the film date session, and the information shown above is the only one you have selected for the movie tickets, since you will not be able to make changes or refunds when the purchase is finished. And remember that you must present a credit card and one single button. Just show me that form if you want to give my money. Or this. Oh, this is just mean. And somebody had to create it. So just for those of you who don't speak German, and I think that's many here, do you have children? Why on earth would a designer sitting in a wonderful, shiny design agency at some point think that having a slider with a pencil icon that you can click on to change the number or slide through with a maximum of 5, right, And if you want to have more than 5, it will not be accepted unless you actually click on the pencil icon, you type in 7, and then you quickly save, because if you go to the next field, the auto-validation will come in and will tell you, no, 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 no. You don't have 7, right? How ridiculous is that? I mean, why would you choose a slider here? I mean, come on, I'm dying here. Really unbelievable. But then even worse, there are more beautiful, beautiful, beautiful examples. And I have to warn you, I promise some dirty stuff. It's coming. It's coming. So this website I will never forget. And if you have, it's sensitive against insects or anything, bugs, things like that, please close your eyes now, because it's not going to be beautiful. And somebody must have designed it. That's what makes me so sad. So this is a configurator for your bug, dead thing, whatever. And I can almost see somebody sitting in Photoshop thinking, let's add some red splatter here. Right? Right? And then, and comes the best part, the slider with a bug on it. Right? How often do you see that in your life? This is just incredible. And it doesn't really matter what you choose because they have only a few products or so. And then they show you, they made it everywhere. Just everywhere. Boom, here's a solution, right? And no conversation about respect can end without a conversation about this beautiful company. Oh, I will never forget one thing. I just need like 3 more minutes and I'll finish. I will never forget one thing, ever. Never, ever. That moment when I decided to book a flight was a big mistake. I decided to book a flight, and then the insurance was added for me automatically. You need to opt out from the insurance, but you need to know how to opt out, because to opt out, you need to find it conveniently located between, and that's important, Denmark and Finland in country selector. Isn't that friendly? But you're cheating because we're in Denmark, so you would have found it easier. It took me a while, and I had to pay for that insurance. That's kind of not okay at all, right? But we do better than this, because we can do better, right? Remember this? Instagram photo showed up, the advertising, where they photoshopped the hair. I mean, it's not my problem, but normally you need to photoshop in hair, so people start clicking on it, because nobody wants to have hair on the phone, right? So the conversion went up. I'm sure the bounce rate too, though, right? Oh, but then somebody said, no, 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 no. We can do better. We can do better. So they plugged in a dirt piece. Isn't that nice? Oh, this is wonderful. But then also at the same time, you end up with these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful notifications like this one. And that makes me so sad, because no, you know what? I'm going to click on that button. No, and it's a link, by the way. I don't want to stay alive. I'm curious what that link would say. Interesting. And then somebody said, no, 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 no. We can do better. Like, you know what works best in marketing? Email marketing. But what's the problem with email marketing? Well, people open an email, they're not interested, or they don't have time, they close it, and we don't have a chance to convince them again. But somebody said, no, 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 we can. Doing this. Can you guess what's going on here? Isn't that nice, right? So this is how it's normally marked that something is unread, but you can plug it in as an emoji in the subject line so it feels like it's not read yet. Oh, this is so mean. And then sometimes, and this is the last one, sometimes even just seemingly simple things can make a big difference. Can you guess what's weird in this interface that drives conversion like top, like crazy? Oh, well, there is a free stuff. You add something to the cart, and you end up with a free thing inside. But that alone isn't good enough. I'm sorry? Start at 1. Oh, yes, that's the one. So this beautiful quantity selector, right? So you add something to the cart, and then you realize, what happens if I click on increase? You tap once, and it says 2. Like, tap, tap, 4. Tap, 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 7. At this point, eventually you continue, right? You go to the checkout, you're filling in the form, personal details and stuff. In your mind, you're thinking, will I get 1 or 7? 1 or 7? And then comes the magical moment. The moment when you go back to the cart, you tap one more time, tap 8, that's it. There is no way you're not going to buy this one. And you don't care about this product anymore. It's like, who cares? Seriously. You just want to know if you're going to get 1 or 8, right? And so this is like a nice, very nice honeypot that you can use there. And this is just bad practices, so please don't do that. Right? All right, so wrapping up, I showed a couple of examples. I will share more slides later. But I think there is one important thing, that despite all the stuff that we're doing on the web today, one thing is important. I think that we spent a bit too much time working on those buttons and the shades of the buttons and the pixels and the border radius, which do not matter. And I would love to see more designs that actually do matter. So I want to leave you with 30 seconds video of an app that I highly encourage you to use. It has not much to do with the talk, but it's very important because the work we're doing is important.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music. We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to.
That's where you come in.
Establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, Be My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button.
That's a nice picture of you and your family, Caroline. Is it for a present? Yes, it's a photo from my parents.
You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app,
Print image.
and we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in.
That milk is way too old.
So, would you care to be my eyes?
You know, the shape of the button and the color of the button doesn't matter here. It's not important at all. So, okay, it's a bit sad. So let me show you just very briefly. 30 seconds. That's really. This is the last one. This is the story of my life in 30 seconds. And it's okay that things are not perfect and not great and not wonderful, because sometimes it's okay if things are not perfect. The story of my life. For designers, huge thanks to Parallel Studio for the animation, and I have cats and more cats and meow and thank you, and looking forward to seeing you later.